The 2025 NFL season is well underway, and just like your favorite NFL team doesn't wait around to pick up its pieces, you can't either as a fantasy football owner. In this episode, we are talking waiver wire pickups for week 3, as well as talking major injuries that happened in this past week's games of the NFL. Welcome, folks. This is Dr. Derek Bennett, Professor Locks, if you will. We're talking NFL waiver wire picks for week 3 to help your fantasy football team host the trophy at the end of the year. Just as always, I'm recording this on Sunday night, kind of while the Sunday night football game is happening. But again, we can't necessarily wait around to get the pieces that we need in case of injury, in case a guy just isn't doing what we necessarily expected when it comes to fantasy football. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about my top 6 waiver wire pickups, really top 5, but I have a couple of additional things that I want to say about some potential additions outside of my top 5 for this week 3 waiver wire. And then towards the end of the show, we're going to be talking about a few guys that got injured today and just giving you kind of their outlook of what's to come within the next week, potentially next months, depending on what injury they had. But let's not wait around. Might as well get right into it. There was a lot of movement, a lot of injuries, a lot of guys filling in this week around the football league. We had a couple backup quarterbacks already. We had some backup wide receivers, a couple tight ends that went out last week. Other than that, like everybody mainly stayed healthy. We'll talk about those injuries towards the end, but a guy that filled in very nicely this week, and I think he's going to continue because their starting quarterback will most likely miss at least another week or 2, if not more than that. And that's Mac Jones out there in San Francisco. Mac had himself a little bit of a day today, throwing for 67%, 279 yards and 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against the lowly New Orleans Saints. And it's just one of those things where we keep talking about how the San Francisco 49ers, just injuries keep piling up and piling up and piling up with the loss of Kittle last week. Juwan Johnson was beat up. He ended up playing. They still don't have Brandon Ayuk coming off that ACL tear. We don't expect him to be back for probably another month or so. But Mac Jones stepped in for a 49ers team, which he probably expected to suit up for much earlier in his career. Going back to draft night, he was kind of thinking that the Niners and Kyle Shanahan might pick him rather than him sliding all the way down to the New England Patriots. But he made the start, had a pretty good day against the Saints. This coming week, he's got a divisional matchup against the Cardinals, and then he plays the Jags. The Niners play the Jags the week after that. As far as the Cardinals defense, we'll kind of see how their defense continues to develop. They have a couple of young pieces on the defensive side of the ball that I'm not fully into yet. I think that defense is young enough and has enough pieces that it could be good and could give the Niners trouble, especially in that division matchup. They know each other so well. But Mac Jones is a veteran quarterback, still a younger veteran, but a veteran that has made plenty of starts, is very capable backup. And that Niners team still has some studs for him to throw the ball to, and it never hurts to have one of the best running backs in Christian McCaffrey stand right next to you. But Mac Jones is a guy that I think would definitely be somebody to look at, especially if you have a Joe Burrow that just went down with injury today. Jake Browning is a guy that I could see looking into him because he does have better weapons at his disposal with T. Higgins and obviously Jamar Chase. But today he looked a little bit rough. Now he wasn't expecting to go in today, obviously, with the injury happening midway through the second quarter. But he did throw for a couple of touchdowns, a few interceptions as well. Did lead them back to a win. But at the same time, between the two, I think it just shakes up better for Mac Jones, in my opinion, between Mac and Jake Browning. So I would go Mac Jones in that case. Moving on, let's talk about a running back that I brought up a couple weeks ago, but he's still available in about 60% of leagues out there, and that's Bhayshul Tuten down there in Jacksonville. I think it's the waters, or the muddy waters, have been cleared. Since that Tank Bigsby trade earlier this week, getting dealt up to the Eagles for a couple of later round draft picks. Travis Etienne is still kind of the lead back there, but I think his target shares are starting to get eaten into already by Tuten. Today, Tuten had 8 carries for 42 yards, about 5 yards a clip. He had a couple of receptions for 32 yards, one of those being a touchdown. He just seems to be a little bit more explosive at this point compared to Travis Etienne. Now, Etienne is definitely the lead horse still there in Jacksonville. He was the leading ball carrier. He did have a hell of a game in week 1, went over 100 yards. But looking forward here, the Jags play Houston at Houston next week, and those AFC South matchups just tend to be dogfights. For whatever reason, Houston does kind of have the Jags number in a lot of cases there, but I think that Tuten is a guy that, even if with a tough matchup coming up this next week, this is a guy that I think Liam Cohen is going to start using more frequently as the season progresses. And with Etienne having some injury history himself, I would not be surprised if Tuten ends up being the lead back in the future throughout the season. But we definitely have more clarity in that backfield, and I think it's time that if you haven't already pulled the trigger on Tugboat Tuten, you might as well do that now, because he's not going to be available for too much longer. And he did put up, I think, a 15-point week this past week. So definitely time to scoop him up. Don't wait around on Bhayshul Tuten. Let's move over into the wide receiver space. I have a couple of guys that, in my opinion, haven't had the best numbers to this point. They've been playing okay, but their quarterbacks have been looking their way a ton on both accounts here. So let's start off with a guy over in Denver, and that's Troy Franklin. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I had a Denver wide receiver, Marvin Mims, on the waiver wire pickup, because initially I thought he was going to be the clear wide receiver too. That hasn't necessarily been the case. Troy Franklin has been the second leading target getter on the Denver Broncos outside of Cortland Sutton. Excuse me. Cortland Sutton is by far their clear wide receiver 1. Bo Nix looks his way more than anybody, but he is, in terms of Troy Franklin, he is outpacing Marvin Mims for targets and for that wide receiver 2 position to this point. He's had back-to-back weeks with at least 6 targets. This week he had, I believe, 9 targets, 8 of which were caught for 89 yards and a touchdown this past week. So Troy Franklin has continued that relationship with Bo Nix way back to even their college days at Oregon. And Troy Franklin's a guy that I think could be a great wide receiver too, especially for more of those deep balls that and just his ability to stretch the field. out there. Now, next week, they have a pretty tough matchup going up against the LA Chargers. But the week after that, they play the Cincinnati Bengals. And we all know that the Cincinnati Bengals secondary is pretty holy, I guess. I mean, they give up a lot of big plays. A lot of times those Bengals are just in shootouts, and who knows if they're going to be able to keep pace with the news of Joe Burrow's injury earlier today. But Troy Franklin up against the Chargers could have a tough matchup. We'll see how that Chargers team looks in week 2 coming up tomorrow night. But the Bengals 2 weeks from now should give Troy Franklin a really good matchup. And this is a guy that is just getting looked at an absolute ton by his quarterback, Bo Nix. Again, another wide receiver that has been looked at a number of times is Cedrick Tillman. They're in Cleveland. Usually I am not a Cleveland backer when it comes to fantasy football. It's been a while since I could say that I fully trust any of their offensive weapons, maybe outside of Jerry Jeudy, who's their wide receiver 1. But Cedrick Tillman is another guy that back-to-back weeks, at least 7 targets, and back-to-back weeks with a touchdown. Cedrick Tillman, for whatever reason, Joe Flacco likes to look his way. He's second only to Jerry Jeudy in targets for the Cleveland Browns. I think he's only 1 target shy of Jerry Jeudy to this point. Now, yes, he's had at least 7 targets the last couple of weeks. That hasn't, and a couple of touchdowns, but that hasn't necessarily led into a ton of receptions this past week. He only had a couple for 22 yards on 7 targets. So this is kind of a boomer bust kind of a guy still, but at minimum, Joe Flacco is giving him opportunities. He's giving him chances to make plays. And when it comes to the Browns, in my opinion, they're going to be behind a lot in the second halves of games. And that's going to lead Joe Flacco and that passing offense to continue to have chances to even load up on points in garbage time. So Cedrick Tillman is a guy that you could look to at the wide receiver position to just add some depth to your bench, or potentially replace somebody that you just thought was going to do better than they have been. Because Cedrick Tillman and Troy Franklin have both been guys that have been getting targets. They've been getting opportunities, and they've made the most of it for the most part over the first couple of weeks. Let's move on to yet another Cleveland Brown at the tight end position, and it's not David Njoku, it's Harold Fannin Jr., the rookie out of Bowling Green State University up there in northern Ohio, not too far from Cleveland. But Harold Fannin Jr. is another guy that's, for whatever reason, Joe Flacco's looking his way. He's been used in a variety of different ways to this point. This week, he caught all 5 of his targets for 5 receptions, 49 yards. Hasn't made it into the end zone quite yet, but the week before, he had 9 targets for 7 catches and 63 yards, and he actually had a carry for a few yards as well. So Harold Fannin Jr., they are finding ways to get him and Njoku on the field at the same time, and I don't necessarily think that's going to change. The Cleveland Browns, and just like with most teams in the AFC North, they like to pound the rock. AFC North football is 2-3 yards in a cloud of dust. The Browns try to do that. The rushing attack hasn't necessarily gotten a ton of traction to this point. And like I said, they tend to get behind, and Flacco has to throw the ball quite often. And Fannin has been on the field and has been getting a lot of the load when it comes to the target share. So Harold Fannin Jr. is another guy, another potential depth piece, especially if you have Njoku on your roster. For whatever reason, if he were to go to go down, Harold Fannin Jr. would be an absolute reception nightmare. I'm afraid. I think he's a guy that would just probably get even more targets just because of the big body that he has, and he is an absolute freak just athletically. Even when he was at Bowling Green, he's putting up some crazy numbers there, although, at a max school. So Fannin Jr. Is the fifth guy that I wanted to talk about at the tight end position. So far, waiver wires has been tough to talk about, honestly, because there haven't been a ton of injuries to major positions. And at this point, we still don't exactly know what guys are going to be used in what roles. Sometimes in week 1 they look good, week 2 they don't get too many opportunities, and vice versa. But as the season continues to shape up, these waiver wire targets and pickups are going to be crucial to develop the depth and to get you through some of those bye weeks that are coming up and not too long from now. So just as a quick review, this week, my top 5 guys on waiver wire is Mac Jones at the quarterback position for the San Francisco 49ers, Bhayshul Tuten from the Jacksonville Jaguars at running back, Troy Franklin from the Denver Broncos, Cedrick Tillman, the wide receiver from the Cleveland Browns, and another Brown, Harold Fannin Jr. At the tight end position. Last week, I did talk a little bit about the defense and special teams position when it comes to traditional fantasy football leagues. And I threw out there that, hey, that Green Bay Packers defense is absolutely insane. I mean, they're a nightmare. And they basically showed up again on Thursday Night Football against the Commanders and for the most part, shut Jaden Daniels down. This week, if I were just trying to ride waivers when it comes to defense, and occasionally that's just the play, that's the strategy that we have, I might be looking at a team in the NFC South, in the Atlanta Falcons to pick up this week. I believe they're basically available in all leagues. But they go up against the Carolina Panthers, who the Panthers just have not been able to get much going with Bryce Young. They've been very inconsistent. They've had trouble with turnovers, which, a young offense, a young quarterback, turning the ball over. Hopefully we get some sacks. Leads to a lot of points when it comes to that defense and special teams position. And honestly, I don't know if that Carolina defense is going to be on the field all that, or Carolina offense is going to be on the field all that long to begin with. The way that the Atlanta Falcons can move the ball, especially with their 2 running backs in Tyler Algier and Robinson. So that's just one potential play that you might be able to do or use at that defense and special teams position. But let's talk a little bit about some injuries, because that's kind of my cup of tea as a doctor of physical therapy, as a healthcare worker. I always like to dive into the injuries because that's where I feel like I have a little bit of an advantage. The big one, I've already talked about it a little bit, was Joe Burrow. Went down in the middle of the second quarter, didn't return today in a battle against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's said that he has turf toe, and turf toe is basically a sprain of a couple of the ligaments that are at the base of your big toe. So if you think of your big toe, the ligaments where the toe runs into kind of the main part of your foot, the ball of your foot, have been overstretched, potentially torn. It's hard to say right now. Joe Burrow is probably on his way to get some MRI imaging done right now. According to Adam Schefter, he's already looking to see a foot specialist within the coming day or two, which doesn't necessarily sound great in my opinion. If they're already starting to talk about seeing alternative doctors outside of their team physician, some sort of a noted foot specialist, Dr. Robert Anderson, is going to be reviewed. if surgery is necessary on this foot, this is going to be a pretty long-term injury. This could be a 3 to 4 month thing, which basically, if this is a 3-month recovery for Joe Burrow, that kind of pushes us into the late December when he could potentially return. It just kind of depends on how Jake Browning and those Cincinnati Bengals do at that point. If we get to week 15, week 16, and the Bengals are completely out of a playoff race, I don't know if we necessarily see Joe Burrow again. On the other side of things, if this is much more mild related injury, he could probably miss 3 to 4 weeks and be back. So with this one, we still have to wait and see. We'll get some further imaging, some further testing done on Joe Burrow within the next couple of days. By the end of the week, we will most likely have a pretty good understanding of how long Joe Burrow will be out. But at this point, the fact that they are already looking to other noted foot specialists doesn't sound great to me. So, earliest I'm thinking missing 3 to 4 weeks. Worst case scenario, he has to have surgery, puts him out another basically 3 months. And at the end of the day, if we're into week 14, week 15, the Bengals are out of the playoff race, he may not necessarily see the field again this 2025 season. But time will tell on Joe Burrow. Hopefully this is a mild thing, but like I said, doesn't sound great. There were really only a couple of other injuries on the offensive side of the ball that are related to fantasy football. And the only couple that I wanted to touch on actually had the same injury. So I'll talk about them a little bit together. But that was Justin Fields, the quarterback for the New York Jets, and Kyle, the juice box Juszczyk, over there in San Francisco. Another 49er goes down. But Justin Fields and Kyle Juszczyk both went out and left the game with concussions. When it comes to concussions as a whole within the NFL has a 5-phase protocol, concussion protocol that guys have to pass in order to return to the field. The first 3 phases, basically we're testing to make sure that their symptoms have started to come down. They can start to get into activities once all of those symptoms have calmed down. Phase 4 is basically a limited practice. Typically, we want to see that by Thursday. Earlier, the better, obviously. If we can get that limited tag coming out Wednesday, great. But Thursday limited practice at least is what we generally look for. And then they have to have at least one full practice before returning to the field. So that basically means if we don't see a full practice by Friday, they will not be playing in the upcoming week. And especially early on in the season, the NFL tends to be a little bit slower at getting this 5-phase protocol through. It just seems like they want to protect the guys earlier rather than later. If this was, week 17 playoff game is on the line, I would not be surprised if either of these guys passed right on through this. But at the same time, we're talking week 2, week 3, most likely, in my opinion, Justin Fields and Juszczyk will both miss a week, potentially 2 weeks. It just kind of depends. Not all concussions are made the same. So it really just depends on symptom severity, and how well they kind of respond to the next couple of days. Just kind of resting, recovering, allowing that brain to heal up. So hopefully by Wednesday, at least by Thursday, we can get that limited practice. Friday, full practice. And again, if that's the case, I would expect them to play. In this case, I don't think we're going to see them in week 3. But coming week 4, I would guess that Justin Fields and Juszczyk would both be back out on the field. So that was all of the injuries that I noted when I was doing my quick review of the early windows from week 2. For those of you that are still following along, If you have any questions, if some of your favorite players or guys that are on your fantasy team came down with injury, drop them down in the comments. I'm going to be checking this throughout the week, and I will try to respond as much as I can. But here at IDP Plus, we're trying to give you as much content, as much information as quickly as we can to make sure that you're up to date to, get through the next week and be prepared to take on your next opponent. So that way we can bring home championships. Unless you're in one of my leagues, then I hope that you don't. But here at IDP Plus, we're talking IDP strategies all the time. We have, Doc, Sebastian talking about IDP related injuries. There's a bunch of rankings coming out, start and sit kind of talk. So we have all kinds of different shows, all kinds of different content. Depending on what you're looking for, most likely you can come to IDP Plus and find that information. So until next time, I'm Dr. Derek Bennett, Professor Locks, if you will. And like I said, if you have any comments, if you have anything that you're looking for, drop them in the comments, share, subscribe, like, all the things. But until next time, I'm out of here.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.